Welcome to Motivational Midwife. My name's Lynn Jones, and today I just thought I'd like to do a short bit on use of language, but how we actually present things to people and the impact that may have. So I just wanted today really to do a short piece on language to get you thinking about some of the things we routinely do and say without generally much thought for the impact that it has on the people in our care. And a lot of the time, particularly when we're looking at people coming into hospital, which, let's face it, is where most people birth their babies. The system as it is currently, we are overrun within maternity, and we are midwives short across the country. So for most areas, it is a challenging place to work in, and I'm still working in it, and it is a challenge on a daily basis. And whereas years ago, perhaps we may have supported those early labourers in a different way, now the onus is to, if they're not in what we would deem to be established labour, we would send them home. And, that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of evidence around home being a much better place for women to be labouring, but not for everybody. Some people want that security of being in hospital. But by saying to people, very often we'll examine them when they come in, they may be only 1 or 2 centimetres dilated, and women will fixate on those numbers. They will not have any concept of all the other changes that have happened to the cervix, like effacement and the consistency and all of those things. They will have no concept of that. And we don't even mention that most of the time. We also fixate on the numbers. And as we all know, it's a very subjective measurement. My 2 will be someone else's 3 and might be someone else's 1. So it is a very subjective measurement. But women, hinge everything on that number, and how you put that number across to them actually can be crucial in how they manage the rest of their labour. If you have someone that comes into triage that's maybe had a very long early labour stage, they maybe have had stop-start contractions for 2 or 3 days before they come into hospital, and then we say, you're only 2 centimetres, off you go home. Very often their thought processes will turn to, if I've had all of this time and all of this discomfort, all of this pain, and I'm only 2 centimetres, I'm not going to be able to manage this, so I'm going to have an epidural. So their mindset has shifted. Whereas if you perhaps put it across to them, all the other changes that have happened, this is amazing, your cervix is really soft, it's done all that taking up, and it's 2 centimetres, that's great, but the best place for you at this point in your labour really would be at home, and explain about, there is evidence to support that they will labour better in this stage at home. And as I say, it's not for everybody. So we need to be mindful that we try and accommodate for those people who that really is just too frightening a thought to go back home. And also think about, have we got any other things in place that would support them? So a lot of units like my own use Oromorph, and women in that sort of phase of labour can come in, they can have some oromorph, we monitor them for a very short period of time, and then they go home again. And there is some reasonably good evidence to suggest that then when they do come back, they're in well-established labour. Thinking about, I teach hypnobirthing, and language is quite a part of the hypnobirthing course, our use of language, and often hypnobirthing is seen as a bit airy-fairy, and there's a lot of eyebrow raising when women come in wanting to use the word surge rather than contraction. But when you teach it, you understand the underpinning rationale for not using words like pain and contraction. For example, if I say to you, have you got any pain anywhere? Unconsciously, you are scanning your body to see if any bits of it are hurting. Whereas if I rephrase that and just say, are you feeling totally comfortable? It has a completely different, I've asked the same thing, but it has a completely different perspective. You say you're either comfortable or you're not comfortable. We've almost conditioned women to expect pain in labour, to expect, nothing you see on the TV really dispels the fact that labour is going to be horrendously painful. So we are indoctrinating women with this idea that labour is going to be extremely painful and that they aren't going to manage it and they can't manage it without some sort of pharmacological intervention. And it's interesting, I teach Catherine Graves' hypnobirthing course, which I can highly, highly recommend, and I will put a link to her website in the description box below. And you don't have to be a midwife to undertake that training, and I would totally recommend that if you have an interest in that area, it is well worth every penny. It's a full antenatal course, it's not just airy-fairy breathing. And it's very, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of evidence in there as well, that you are giving parents. And it's interesting when you speak to parents that choose to undertake that, very often it is second and subsequent time parents who have had a very traumatic first birth and they don't want to repeat that. A lot of it is about being in control. And again, the language we use doesn't put parents in control. How many times have you heard someone say, am I allowed? Am I allowed to go in the pool? Am I allowed to have a home birth? Well, actually, in reality, these women can do what they like as long as we've, given them the information to make an informed choice. We may not like their choice, we may not agree with their choice, but it is ultimately their choice. And there's another video I have done all about choice and supporting choice, because it is a little bit of a bugbear of mine. So please, if you're interested in that area, do go and have a look at that one. But it's interesting that these parents have opted for that, having had poor experiences. And you do find yourself wondering, why did they have poor experiences? Is it because we've kind of set them up to fail to start with? Very often, a lot of hypnobirthing is really about putting the parents back in control of the decision making. And we do, with this whole allowed thing, we do take that control away from parents. Parents we often don't present, particularly in a hospital setting, we don't really present options in a very unbiased way. Things that spring to mind currently are around vaginal breech, for example. Do we really give women up-to-date information to make an informed choice about cesarean section versus vaginal breech, and certainly, and again, I'll put the link for this website in the description. Sean Walker's breechbirth.org is an excellent site for evidence-based information around breech. And they also run training, which again around physiological breech is a total must if you have an interest in breech. It really is an excellent course. Obviously, that is for midwives mostly. And ideally doctors as well. But and there are quite a few consultants now. At my own trust, there are 2 consultants that I have recently heard giving an excellent, well-balanced, unbiased discussion to women who have had breech babies on board, and they have made that decision to have a vaginal breech delivery. And it's been really nice to see, particularly recently with one primate who had made that decision. And clearly the team were not in favour of supporting her choice, but they did support her. And it was really nice to see that actually they did all pull together to try and support her with that decision. I mean, ultimately, it didn't work out, and for a variety of reasons, she did end up with a cesarean section. But they did all come together and try and support her with that choice. But it's interesting that sometimes how we put those facts and figures across to people are really in a very skewed way, and a very frightening way as well. We tend to talk about risk a lot as opposed to chances of. And if I say your risks of something, instantly your brain is thinking very risk averse. And I say I am equally as guilty of kind of using that terminology as well. Whereas if we say your chances of something, it does seem to give a more balanced approach, in my opinion, anyway. If we think about if you think about, I mean, part of when you're teaching hypnobirthing, we're looking at labour, and if you're thinking about it's a physiological process. We're designed to labour and give birth, generally speaking. And all things being considered, and a level playing field and nothing else going on there, why should this cause pain? Does any other muscle in your body, when it's carrying out its normal function, cause pain? On a daily basis, my arm moves like this, but it's not aching from using that because my biceps and my triceps are designed to be doing that. So the uterus is designed to do the job it's meant to do. So why should it be painful? And is it because we have our use of language? We use the word pain a lot, and often people will say, on a scale of, how bad is your pain? Whereas if we moved away from the word pain and used discomfort, would it have the same connotations? Would we have already, made women think this is going to be painful? Everything in the media portrays childbirth as excruciatingly painful. You rarely see not pain-free labours, but you rarely see women who actually manage their labours really well on television because it's not entertaining. And you have to remember that all of these programmes that are on TV, they are there for entertainment purposes. And if it's boring, which, to be fair, normal labour and birth can be quite boring for an onlooker, then that's not going to get viewing figures up. So we are constantly through the media bombarding birthing people with the notion that they're not going to be able to manage their labour without us helping them and us intervening and giving them pharmacological options for pain relief. When we do a lot of antenatal classes, for example, we talk about pain relief. We don't talk about comfort measures. If the baby is in a posterior position, so back to back, we tell women that they're going to have a long labour, it's going to be really painful, and it will probably end up with a forceps or a section. Back-to-back babies are going to have long, drawn-out labours. Well, they might do, but they might not. Every woman is different. And we kind of have this one-size-fits-all for women, which I find extraordinarily frustrating. When women are having these very long, drawn-out, uncomfortable, particularly early stage of labour, then you need to think to yourself, perhaps, is there, rather than being quite dismissive, which we are all guilty of, have a bath, have a couple of paracetamol, ring us when things have picked up a little bit. Should we be thinking, is there some sort of labour dystocia going on here? Is there a biomechanical issue? That we perhaps could arm them with some techniques that may alleviate some of those if it's a biomechanical issue. And again, Molly O'Brien's Optimal Birth site offers some extraordinarily good courses on biomechanics for parents and for professionals. And I'm, fortunate enough to be part of that. And they are useful techniques, which, if it's a biomechanical issue, sometimes will help parents just get through that early stage and manage their labour more comfortably. And again, I will put that in a link to Molly's site in the description box below. When we meet couples, birthing people, particularly in labour, how you introduce yourself, how you approach them, we're supposed to, as midwives, have them as the centre of our care. And I'm not sure we always do. I find it frustrating sometimes where you might be caring for someone, or you may, and midwives seem to spend a lot of time out of the room rather than in the room with the people they're caring for. And there may be very good reasons for that, but my own practice is I try and stay in the room with the person that I'm caring for, unless they don't particularly want me in the room for any reason. But most parents find it reassuring that you're there for them. And part of our role as a midwife really is watchful attendance. But I think as time's gone on, we find it quite difficult to do that. We find it quite difficult to do that watchful, allowing labour to unfold. We need to be doing something. And of course, if we've managed to make women believe that they can't do it, and I say part of that is how we talk to them, how we get across what's going on to them. Particularly with OP labours, posterior labours, very often you will hear people say, well, you're probably better to have an epidural early if you've got a posterior position, because it's going to be a very long labour, and you may end up with an instrumental delivery. So, or even a section. So you've already planted those seeds of doubt into people's brains before they've even got that far. Of course, if they've got an epidural, they've got a lot of things that we're doing then. We're doing a lot of monitoring, we're doing stuff as opposed to watchful attendance. But that's just, my perspective on it. And I do find it quite frustrating that we seem to be slowly eroding our art of watchful attendance and allowing birth to unfold because of the culture we work within these days. And it's almost like a conveyor belt mentality that we have, as quick as we can get those babies out, we enforce timeframes that are not massively evidence-based. If you look at NICE guidance around second stage of labour, and you look at the evidence they've actually based it on, really, there is no really good evidence. It's just kind of people's expert opinion that would be a good time, without any consideration for the fact that if the mother and baby are okay, do we need to really stick to those very strong, rigid timetables? So really it's just, the point of this is really just to make you think about how you speak to people. You need to put them at the center of your care. So, introduce yourself to them, find out what they prefer to be called. Generally my first, after I've introduced myself to them and settled them into the room, usually the first thing I say is, have you written some birth preferences or a birth plan, and have you got it with you? Because then I can be reading that without disturbing her labour, and clarify any points that may need clarifying. The vast majority of women are not awkward. They're not out to cause you problems. They generally just want to be in control of their birth and in control of the decision making, and so they should be as well. Imagine how you would feel if you go for an appointment, or how you might feel when you go for an appointment and things are offered to you as a fait accompli, as opposed to a choice, or a very skewed choice, because how you're being presented with things is in a very biased way, using language that actually skews it towards what we want people to do. And there you have it. I hope it's made you think. I hope you may go back to your work areas and look at how you do things in your own work areas, and look at some of your guidelines as well, because it's interesting how they are worded and how they may skew perceptions for birthing people. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do, and I look forward to seeing you next time.